In a world filled with endless distractions, arrogance, and impulsive decisions, wisdom is a rare and valuable trait. The Stoics believed that intelligence was not about how much you know, but how well you live by reason, discipline, and virtue. And yet, stupidity, true ignorance, is not just about a lack of knowledge. It is about repeated mistakes, unchecked emotions, and a refusal to grow. A foolish man ignores wisdom, reacts impulsively, and lets his emotions rule him. He seeks validation over truth, pleasure over discipline, and speaks more than he listens. He is enslaved by his desires, blind to his flaws, and deaf to the lessons of life. Today we will uncover 6 clear signs of a stupid man, 6 traits that the Stoics warned us against. If you recognize them in yourself, change them. If you see them in others, distance yourself. Because true strength is not in appearing smart, but in the courage to grow, to learn, and to master oneself. Let's begin. 1. Speaks more than he listens. A foolish man believes that his words carry more value than they actually do. He dominates conversations, eager to prove his intelligence, but in doing so, he reveals his ignorance. The Stoics taught that wisdom begins with listening, not speaking. A man who talks endlessly without absorbing knowledge shuts the door to growth. When a man speaks more than he listens, it is often driven by insecurity. He craves attention, desires approval, and mistakes noise for influence. He interrupts, disregards other perspectives, and assumes he already knows everything. In reality, the most intelligent minds are those that remain open, humble, and willing to learn. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This is not just a clever saying, it is a principle for life. A man who does not listen remains trapped in his own limited understanding. He misses wisdom, opportunities, and crucial lessons because he is too busy projecting his own voice. True strength lies in knowing when to be silent. A wise man listens, observes, and absorbs knowledge before responding. He understands that silence is not weakness, it is power. 2. Driven by emotion, not reason. A foolish man allows his emotions to dictate his actions. He reacts impulsively to anger, frustration, or fear without considering the long-term consequences. Instead of thinking logically, he lets his feelings control him, making reckless decisions that often lead to regret. The Stoics taught that true wisdom comes from mastering emotions, not being enslaved by them. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A weak man blames the world for his emotional outbursts, while a wise man understands that his reaction is always within his control. A foolish man, however, lashes out in anger, acts on impulse, and later wonders why his life is filled with chaos. Emotions are natural, but they should not rule over reason. A man who lacks emotional discipline will struggle in relationships, business, and personal growth. He will let pride, envy, or resentment cloud his judgment, pushing away opportunities and people who could help him grow. True strength comes from self-control. A man who thinks before he reacts, who pauses before he speaks, and who remains steady in the face of adversity will always outsmart the one who is controlled by emotions. 3. Seeks validation over truth. A foolish man craves approval more than he seeks wisdom. He measures his worth by the opinions of others, constantly needing recognition to feel valuable. Instead of pursuing truth, he adjusts his beliefs and actions to fit in, afraid of standing alone. The Stoics warned against this, teaching that true strength comes from inner conviction, not external validation. Seneca once said, "If you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich." A man who chases validation is never satisfied. He is a slave to trends, public opinion, and the expectations of those around him. His happiness depends on others' approval, making him weak and easily manipulated. This kind of man avoids hard truths. He prefers comforting lies over painful realities because he fears rejection. He seeks applause rather than wisdom, often surrounding himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear instead of what he needs to hear. But real growth comes from facing the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A wise man stands firm in his values. He seeks knowledge over popularity and chooses integrity over acceptance. The foolish man, however, will always be lost, chasing approval but never finding himself. 4. Blames others for his failures. A foolish man refuses to take responsibility for his own life. When he fails, he looks for someone to blame: his parents, his boss, society, or even fate. He convinces himself that external forces are the reason for his struggles, never realizing that his greatest obstacle is himself. The Stoics taught that true power comes from owning one's actions, not making excuses. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." A wise man understands that setbacks and failures are part of life. Instead of complaining, he looks for lessons and adjusts his approach. A foolish man, however, wastes his energy pointing fingers. He complains about his circumstances but does nothing to change them. Blaming others is a sign of weakness. It keeps a man stuck, preventing him from growing or improving. He may fool himself into thinking that shifting responsibility protects his pride, but in reality, it only deepens his failure. No one respects a man who constantly makes excuses. A strong man accepts his mistakes, learns from them, and moves forward. He understands that no one else is responsible for his success or failure, only he is. A foolish man prioritizes short-term pleasure over long-term success. He indulges in laziness, distractions, and instant gratification while neglecting the discipline required to build a meaningful life. Instead of working on his goals, he seeks comfort. Instead of embracing challenges, he avoids them. The Stoics warned that pleasure, when uncontrolled, weakens a man's spirit and leads to ruin. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. A man who lacks discipline is controlled by his desires. Whether it's food, entertainment, alcohol, or social approval, he allows pleasure to dictate his choices, making him weak and unreliable. He procrastinates, makes excuses, and wonders why success eludes him. True greatness requires sacrifice. The strongest men in history were not the ones who lived for pleasure, but those who embraced hardship, trained their minds, and mastered their impulses. A disciplined man wakes up early, works on his craft, and prioritizes growth over comfort. A foolish man, however, sleeps in, wastes time, and wonders why others surpass him. A man who chases pleasure but avoids discipline will never reach his full potential. He remains a slave to his desires, never realizing that true freedom comes from self-control. A foolish man refuses to learn from experience. He repeats the same mistakes, ignores wise counsel, and rejects the lessons that life tries to teach him. Instead of seeking growth, he clings to his ego, believing he already knows enough. The Stoics warned that arrogance blinds a man to truth, keeping him trapped in ignorance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every challenge, failure, and hardship holds a lesson, but only a wise man is willing to learn. A foolish man, however, dismisses advice, refuses correction, and blames circumstances rather than adjusting his actions. He would rather protect his pride than admit he was wrong. Ignoring wisdom leads to stagnation. A man who refuses to learn will stay in the same place year after year, while those who seek knowledge continue to grow. Life rewards those who are willing to adapt, improve, and evolve. A wise man values wisdom over his ego. He listens, observes, and applies what he learns. A foolish man, however, remains blind to his flaws, ensuring that his failures are not just occasional missteps, but a permanent cycle.